As 2026 splutters into action, this evening's agenda takes a look at the year ahead and offers a few predictions and insights into the year that lies before us. I'm joined on the programme by political soothsayers Alistair Ramsey and Chris Robertshaw. Having in our last appearance together, I think struggled to find too many positives. We have a new year ahead. It's a time where people try to declutter and come up with loads of New Year's resolutions and all of these wondrous things. Is Tynwald capable of decluttering, of turning over new leaves, do you think?
This House isn't, no. I think there needs to be really serious reflection in the months running up to the election in September on where things have become really concerning. And I would pick out the failings of Treasury and the unwillingness to, linked with the rest of government, to live within our means at one level. Two, I would recognise the paucity of delivery of good quality in-cost projects. We're sort of seeing the Liverpool landing stage fallout live with us for some considerable time.
And of course, before that...
And finally, I hope, and I seem to have been a lone voice for a long time here, I hope that the coming year sees a growing understanding of the weaknesses and failings within our Attorney General's system, which is now just a monster, and it needs bringing into line.
Gosh, well, we'll get into those a bit further, but just to start with, Alistair, what should we be looking forward to in 2026?
Well, I don't know about looking forward to, but the budget this year will be interesting. Obviously, it's a pre-election budget, and it's got quite a lot of work to do, including around the minimum wage controversy. The Chief Minister's loaded quite a lot of expectation that don't worry, businesses, we're going to help you in the budget. And then there's presumably the usual kind of appeal to the public that will come out. So how they're going to square the circle and be good to everyone, and also respect the new emphasis on fiscal discipline and responsibility will be very interesting.
Do you think that we will have a pre-election budget that pulls surprising rabbits out of hats and actually...
The whole minimum wage thing, I mean, it so shows where the weaknesses in the system are. I mean, the Treasury have absolutely blundered into this whole thing of minimum wage, declaring now...
Treasury would argue that they're doing what Tynwald asked them to do.
No, what the Tynwald asked, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, what it thought, and then took elements of that and then completely reinvented them insofar as the Chamber said, well, look, link the concept of minimum wage at 66% with the private sector, but Tynwald linked it with the public sector, which is way out of a sort of sync with the private sector, and blundered into this ridiculous situation. But prior to Christmas, looking back, the government hadn't spoken to the local economy forum, and yet was making all sorts of declarations. What's perhaps not understood here, I think this is very important, local economy forum stands for the concept of ensuring that the take-home pay that it's proposing is higher than the government proposals. And you might say, well, how and why? Well, it's all linked to how, over the last 5 years, particularly, the concept of tax increases have been creeping in, as it were, like rising damp, because the tax thresholds have hardly moved at all in 5 years. For example, the somebody on a minimum wage at the beginning of the current administration did not pay tax at 21%. It's now with the latest minimum wage, it's going to be paying the high rate, the 21% rate, for the top £7,000 a year. Government take off the lowest paid has moved up from 8% at the beginning of the administration to 15% now. It requires taking more money off the low pay to ensure that it balances the books, and the personal tax threshold, which we know now is 14,750 for each individual person, has only sort of moved up slightly. And if you moved it to where it should be now just close to £20,000, and it's not. And so this is the problem.
When you say where it should be, what do you mean by that?
Well, if it was adjusted, if you continue to adjust it with inflation, it would be at more or less £20,000, and it's not. So extraordinarily last year, it's just extraordinary. This Alex Allison came out. Oh, well, the economy must be doing well, because look at how we've found this significant increase in tax income. Everything's fine. No, it's not. It's because all the time he's quietly been increasing the tax take as inflation has adjusted people's wages. So what I expect to happen in the budget, he's going to come out like, okay, we're past Christmas now, but he'll come out like Father Christmas saying, well, look, aren't I wonderful? I'm going to increase your personal tax allowances, but it'll only be so much and no more. And
Alistair, then, are you expecting any big surprises in the budget? Any rabbits will be extracted
I think
from
they're
hats?
probably working on making the rabbits as we speak, but I think they're going to struggle. And one of the things that interests me is, given the opposition to the minimum wage proposal, in an election year, it will be quite unusual for the politicians to hold out against that pressure, because I think it's going to get to them. I think it's really going to start shaking some of the backbenchers in particular. And I'm wondering whether they will come up with some kind of fudge or retreat or something before it actually takes effect in April.
Well, the fudge that I understand it's going to be is, oh, well, let's find some way of helping and supporting. I mean, one despairs at that sort of approach. What they're actually saying there is, look, let's take more money off the private sector via the gross pay through the wages, because that's what they're actually doing through tax and NI. And let's find some bureaucratic, expensive way of being seen to give it back. That's essentially the essence of Alex Allinson's very pro-socialist approach to things, that government dominates and controls. And let's hope at the election we see a move to a much more pragmatic and fair way forward.
We'll come on to the election. Let's have a brief glance at global affairs. Do we expect the war in Ukraine to have finally come to an end? Will Donald Trump's approach to finding peace have worked, do you think, Alistair?
Gosh, if I could give a proper answer to that, I'd have a lot more money than I've got. God knows. I mean, it is this kind of if this random, irrational approach, this disruptive approach that somehow occasionally produces results, and I don't know. I mean, I just can't see Putin giving enough, or giving any ground at all. So.
It is a bit like Churchill saying, or I don't know, one of the other great leaders of the world during the Second World War saying to Churchill, look, Hitler, you know, he's got all the cards here. You've got none of the cards. Actually, you really do need to give this one up. it is that equivalent, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's disgusting actually. But there you go.
What's disgusting? Sorry.
The way that the Americans have treated Zelensky. Well, that initial very performative beating up when he was at the White House is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen.
Well, one can only feel agony for the young people in Ukraine who are dying in those fields, but I don't know how do you answer that question you've posed, Phil? I think first of all the continuation of the war will depend upon American dollars, and if Trump is determined, he will find a way of using that money leverage to bring things to a resolution. I think prior running up to Christmas saw Ukraine beginning to move. I think Europe is standing, as it were, apparently lock solid behind Ukraine, but at the same time it hasn't got the funds, the armaments, etc., to supply to Ukraine. And the Ukrainian people themselves give the impression, from my interpretation of the situation, of becoming really exhausted at the whole thing. So, I sort of expect some sort of deal to appear where the eastern territories of Ukraine end up under Russian control, and that things move on from there. I mean, I think it wasn't Ukraine before Christmas talking about, well, we're going to join the EU, etc. So a very, very sad matter.
And then in terms of a little closer to water, closer to home, I should say, the UK political situation. I mean, is that going to... well, it's bound to develop in some way, but are the current issues the UK Labour Party is facing, are they going to resolve in any way, or are they going to continue to struggle?
I think you in that programme we did before Christmas, Perspective, you remember you said that you were identifying the way the right had split and the left had split. I think the degree of failure on the part of both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is now so profound, and the circumstances the country finds itself, UK finds itself in, so much difficulty. There's going to be a breakdown of the two-party, or what they call the uniparty system. I think people have had enough. How it all pans out, we have yet to see. But I think we've arrived at the end of an era there.
Alistair?
Yes, I think it's interesting that the kind of resurgent Greens under this Polanski guy is a reminder that populism can be left as well as right. The other thing that I think is interesting is that Reform have now got into local government with the promise that they were going to cut budgets and make it more efficient and so on. And apparently they are struggling with that, which is instructive, I think, for everyone who thinks there's an easy way of doing these things. Whether that, if they don't succeed at local government, whether that will take the wind out of their sails or not, I don't know.
I don't think it will, personally, because I think the failure of both parties is so self-evident and enormous that it's difficult for people, sort of centrist voters, if you like, to default back to what they absolutely recognise is real failure. And it's a time of great worry for the UK.
So then the big thing that's going to happen in the Isle of Man, well, at least one of the big things, the one that we know about, is the election in September next year. What can we expect from that election, Alistair?
I fear that we can expect more of the same, that we have an election that's still not really based on national issues. It's still, you're not going to have an awful lot of meaningful choice. You're going to go for kind of sound personalities. It will be interesting to see if there's any real kind of anti-government reaction this time that actually takes out a few of the incumbent members. I think we have to be careful about that, because I think quite a few of the sitting members are inexperienced, but are actually quite sound, intelligent, well-meaning people. And I think we have to be careful what we wish for, and to throw those out for some really quite inferior alternatives just because they're alternatives is a danger. But I don't know.
Perhaps, is there going to be an understanding before the election or not as to whether people grasp the concept that the MHKs really aren't running the show, that the departments are running the show, the chief executives, the dominance of the Council of Minister vote, which emanates from the departments. If people can grasp the point that that's what's controlling it, regardless of who they get in or put in, then we have a chance. And that's why I'm so personally dedicated to this concept of identifying 3 fundamental principles that must be part of regardless of whatever people take in terms of their own policies to the electorate. As far as I'm concerned, is their business. What I'm talking about is, and others, is how do you make government itself work better for the people and for the system itself? And the 3 principles are improved democracy, improved governmental efficiency through unified government, and significantly improved high-level strategic thinking through reassembling of how that process works. And there are all sorts of opportunities for government to progressively become a much better organisation if those 3 principles are adopted. So somebody with left of centre, somebody right of centre, doesn't really matter. As long as they adopt these principles, as long as enough people, successful candidates, go in with those 3 principles, as it were, in their grasp, then we really have an opportunity to improve our government. If we rely simply in isolation on who we choose being able to do it, I think we'll fall down. But there's a real worry this time that we're running out of money and we're running out of time, and if we do again after the next election what we've done this time, I think we're in real trouble. Because I mean, you hear Alex Allinson talking about, the reserves are going up, etc. Well, they're not going up in the way that they should do. And what's actually happening is government, in its failure to live within its means, they are actually, by dipping into the reserves, they're spending our grandchildren's pensions, and in fact to some extent the future pensions of our children, and that's an absolute disgrace.
To be fair on Alex Allinson, though, he is in a similar position to most finance ministers in our part of the world. They're all struggling to square the circle of increasing demand and nowhere near the same level of increase in the funds to pay for all of that.
Yes, and he would say, I imagine, that you're talking about future generations, that this expenditure dipping into reserves or whatever is actually investing in that future.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying that's what he would say.
Then he would be completely wrong, because what he's doing is he's dipping into the reserves to pay for an ever more expensive operating organisation, which is disgraceful, Alistair. Absolutely out and out disgraceful.
He, though, is one of now. We're back to 9 in the Council of Ministers. It briefly was 10 there, but Tim Krukle decided that being a minister without portfolio wasn't for him. So, each minister is one voice in the Council of Ministers, and there are 8 other voices. Much as how I get your drift here, Chris, that you want to blame the Treasury Minister, all of the Council of Ministers are responsible for government policy. And then, if government policy is to get through, they need several more votes from the Keys and indeed from Legco to make it happen.
I think I'll take you back to the programme we did before Christmas, where I think certainly you and maybe both of you, certainly you, Phil, suggested that we were actually leaving Treasury to get on with it. I mean, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, but that is ultimately the responsibility of those who are letting them, as much as it is the responsibility of Treasury. You know, if Tynwald and Isle of Man government has been anything over the course of the last generation or two, it has been a collective. Collective decisions have been taken, which generally means that we don't have radical in Manx politics, but we end up with a collective view somewhere in the middle, which everyone can accept.
I'm troubled, having difficulty with agreeing with your opinion here, because you ask most members of Keys, and they'll say, well, you know, it's almost a fait accompli issue. It can't be both. It can't be they are responsible and yet they're not. The way Treasury has been going in the last house, in this house we're still in now, it's very much one of a determination not to live within our means, to pretend that things are good. Absolutely coming back to this point about it's not investing in the future. Right now, with the world in the troubled state that it's in, where jurisdictions, where nations are running into ever more difficulties, and remember they are in a position to print their own currencies and inflate their way out. We always understand that we can't do that, therefore we must live within our means. And there is no way that the Isle of Man can move forward if it's going to keep increasing its tax take, which it has been doing because of these threshold issues, on the basis that we need to service a significantly sized government. We can't have it every which way, and we need a Treasury that recognises this fully.
I am going to predict, because I'm going to ask you all to predict, because we've only got a few minutes left now. My prediction is that the budget will be pleasantly surprised with the budget, and my prediction is that we will not see. This is a risk, isn't it? This is a big risk I'm taking here live on air. We're not going to see a huge turnover of elected members at the next general election. That is me really probably undermining my political credibility by suggesting that. But
there is always that mood, isn't there, that this is the worst government ever, and that there's going to be big changes. People looking forward to it. I think there's more people now saying it's the worst government ever than there ever were before. But the problem you come back to is one of resources, that the potential political talent pool in the Isle of Man is incredibly shallow, and that, you might, in an ideal world, want to get rid of your sitting members, but what's the alternative?
And do you have a prediction? We've only got a very short time left, or are you going to keep your counsel?
I think there will be some turnover, but not as much as you might think.
It will depend entirely upon constituency by constituency as to whether the electorate identifies somebody who they think will be worthy of their vote, and because we don't know where we stand there, it's difficult to say. So, I mean, you could be very neutral and say, well, the average is about seven turnover. If people are willing to stand and put who have identified credible standpoints, then it may well go up. But certainly coming to your and should as well. But coming back to your point, yes, I think there will be a really firm effort on the part of the Treasury Minister to present the next budget in as warm and cheerful light as he possibly can, and deflect criticism. I hope that deflection doesn't work. I hope we really come to terms with the fundamental issues that we face, and that the next House is in a position to grasp the nettles.
Finally then, are we going to see a flood of candidates at the next election? Or do you think maybe people have witnessed what's gone on in Tynwald, which seems to be much less collegiate, and think, do I really want to spend 5 years in there?
I think there's a possibility that we might see that move of candidates. It may actually just be wishful thinking on my part. I don't know. It's just too early to say.
I think there'll be maybe quite a few people will be encouraged to have a go by that kind of perception of the public mood and that public disillusionment. Thinking, well, actually there could be an opportunity there, and it's a well-paid career.
Well, what I do hope, if one can put a hope forward, is that there are more people in the next House with a record of a solid business background than currently the case, because there's hardly anybody now in there who've come through a life of work within the private sector with all the cuts and bruises that one can associate with one's experience to deliver good judgment on the floor of Keys and Tynwald.
My guests this evening were Alistair Ramsey and Chris Robertshaw. What do you think? Will there be a political clear-out in the general election? And will the Treasury Minister be able to square the numerous circles being thrown at him? Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gaughan at manxradio.com, and please get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast. For now, I'm Phil Gaughan. Go to Thanks for listening.